Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Good Stuff. My name is Kevin Bille, and as always, we appreciate you joining us here today. Well, we've got baseball. It's hot and heavy right now. We're going to get a World Series prediction here probably sooner than later, but today we have Mike Deegan with us, the head baseball coach at Denison University. Coach, it's great to have you.
Kevin, thanks for having me on. You know, you've had a few of my mentors on here and many people that I admire, so it's very flattering to spend this time with you.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Hey, let's just go back first to Marietta. I know we touched base on this a little bit, but you played there, had a great career, and then you coached there. I'd just be anxious to know what that experience was like for you. I did the same thing in college. I went to school, went away and played, but then came back and got my master's there. What was that like for you starting out?
It was interesting. You nailed it. I mean, I think I graduated and then I went and worked what I would call a real job for a couple of years in sales at Coca-Cola. And then the head coach, a legend named Don Shalley, retired, had been there for 40 years, winningest coach in Division III history, ABCA coach of the century. Well, anyways, he retired, and Coach Brewer, who was the assistant coach for 2 years when I was there, got the job and asked me to come back and work. And it's funny now I reflect upon that because I didn't know what I wanted to do, didn't know if I wanted to coach or whatever. And there was hundreds of applicants for that job. And Coach Brewer really saw something for me and him to work together. And so I just took the job kind of without giving it much thought or without giving as much thought to how great of an opportunity that was. But you're right. So when I came back, I was coaching guys who were freshmen my senior year. So there was a little bit of that. Mm-hmm. But, I think for me, it wasn't too hard. It really wasn't. I wasn't someone who was over the top socially or anything like that. So I could continue to just lean into who I was. And that was actually really great advice that Coach Brew gave me. I said, Coach, Coach Shalley was a really aggressive type. Coach Brew was a real aggressive type. And I said, hey, I don't know if I can be like that. And Coach Brew said, hey, you just be you. You be you, and we're going to be fine. And once again, little small nugget that really replays my mind now, 20 years later, to just be you. And we can get into that in different ways, but just being your authentic self, I think, is the best way to coach and lead. So, yeah, it was a little bit awkward, but not anything that I wasn't prepared for.
Yeah, good advice for sure. Well, hey, 3 national championships while you were there. I would love for you to share what those experiences were like. And what was it that separated those teams? My assumption would be that every team's different, because it seems like when you coach every year is different, but maybe there were even some similarities that stick out to you too.
I look back at some of them it's honestly kind of blurry. The 2006 national championship, the first one, there was a 20-year gap. So Marietta won national championships in 81, 83, 86. So there have been 20 years. But that was my third year coaching. And I think I was pretty naive. It just kind of happened. I don't even know how to say it. I mean, I wasn't overly involved in the recruiting. Like, there were some older guys there that we inherited. But then actually there were quite a few first year guys that made some contributions, but it just kind of happened. And I almost thought, oh, we can do this all the time, and then after that 2006 national championship, we got back in 2007 to the World Series, didn't perform that well, but we were still one of the top, 5 teams in the country. And then we had some rough patches. 2008 was the worst year in Marietta college history. We went 23-20, and we struggled. And then we bounced back, and then we won the back-to-backs in 2011 and 2012. And I think winning that second one, winning the back-to-back, the second leg of that in 12, was something that was really, really satisfying for me. To have that bullseye on your chest. When you play at Marietta, there's always a bit of a bullseye, but even more so to be ranked 1 to start the year and to win a national championship. And there were some rough patches throughout that year. Was something that I'll always cherish. I think it's really hard to do that. But as far as what were similar, I would say, let's not kid ourselves. I mean, unbelievable talent.
Yeah,
we had as many draft guys in 11 and 12 as Ohio State University, to kind of give it a perspective. Like, we had pro guys on those teams. And so that's where it starts. But I think too, just this deep desire to be your best. I think that was probably it. I mean, those teams were willing to do whatever they could to become the best version of themselves. And then also, I would say that people didn't really care who got the credit. I mean, it was really about having that humility to just win. And that's a bit of a lost art, Kevin, I think, as we kind of move into 21. It's just that selfless nature amongst stars, right? And when I say stars, I think, it's all relative. We're not talking about MLB stars.
Yeah, for sure.
We're talking about stars at that level. Really could just buy into a bigger concept.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Well, now you've been at Denison. I think it's your 10th year coming up. And to say you've been successful there is an understatement. What's, I guess, two-part question. What's been the key to that success? And then how do you now knock down that door, right? You're getting there. You're getting closer. I got to think that's what's on the mind of your staff and players at this point.
Yeah. So how do we get there? I think that's a great place to start. I've been asked that in different ways. The only thing that I can really go back to is that we had a vision. We had a vision to try to be an elite baseball program and an elite academic institution. And that had never been the case here. Those two things, I think people saw them almost as mutually exclusive, right? Like you can be great academically, but you can't be great athletically. And so we really just started singing our story into existence. We started just saying, like, this is what we're going to do. We're going to play. You're going to get a national caliber degree, a world-class degree. And we're also going to try to play elite level baseball. Now, who wants to sign up? So we started just singing that story. And I always say, Kevin, I'm one of the worst recruiters in the world. We just tell our story. Like, so people will ask me all the time, like, no, they'll want something a lot of times a lot more shiny and glamorous. They'll say, like, where do you see me playing? Am I going to play right away? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. We think you have the skills. We think you have the talent that could thrive in this environment. But from there, I don't know. So those are like, that's just some of the conversations we've had. And I think little by little, we've been able to attract the right people into our program. So that's one. And then I would say the second, if I were to put a premium on anything we do, I think our learning environments are world class. I think we do as much as we possibly can with the resources we have in front of us. And I think we've done that for a long time. And now we're seeing the fruits of that labor, right? So that's kind of how we got to here. Now, the second part of that question, boy, I don't know. I don't know. I think we just keep doing more of the same. I think we double down on who we are. I think as I've gotten older, I've become okay with trying to be the best version of us, like trying to do what we do at the highest level we can. And, like I said, we were a game away from the World Series last year. We've been to 3 straight national tournaments. So I think we're just going to keep doubling down on what we're doing, and I like our chances of us being the best version of us then, and whether or not we can win a World Series, we'll find that out. But I like the path we're on.
Yeah, a couple things here I want to stay on. Let's go with what you said about being the best version of yourselves. I'd be anxious to know, because this has changed so much for me. Like, if you would ask me when I was 25, 35, or 2 years ago, or even last year, like, is that how you define success? Is that where it's at this point of your life and for yourself and then for your team?
Absolutely. And I don't think that's just coach speak for me now, Kevin. I think it would have been coach speak for me 10 years ago, right? Like, because you're always constantly comparing yourself to the competition. And look, we're competitors and we still do that, right? When we notice good recruits going to our programs, competitors, it kind of heightens us a little bit. We're like, darn it. But I know that like there's a lot of this has to do with resources and there's certain expectations for programs that may not be realistic sometimes. So I feel like my job now is to try to increase some of those resources to get on that level, right? But until you're resourced at a certain space, it's tough to compare yourselves to the Mariettas, right? Like they're on a different path than we are. Now, can we do everything we can with what we have? And I would say, and I'll throw humility out the window for a moment, I think we've gotten pretty close to that. So now for us, it's like, okay, now for me as the leader, how can I knock down some of those obstacles in order for us to achieve at the highest level? All with doing it within the context and the values within Denison University as well. Like, we can't be, another program. We can just do Denison. So yes, I would say it's being the best version of ourselves. But I don't want that to be a ceiling on this thing. I don't want that to be the roof. Like, I want to go, okay, like this, we've done as good as we can now, but what can we chip away at in order to us to improve and be more consistent long term? And that's where I am. So I don't use it as an excuse. I use it as it's reality. I think, when I listen to Mark Shapiro on here, he talked about that. Excuses are real sometimes, right? Like they are absolutely. Right. But then we can't allow it to limit us and make us defeated either. So yes, being the best version, but also raising that bar to be able to become even a better version of that.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I mean, I think it's, I agree with where you're at. That's a big thing. I mean, people just want you to win regardless, and they don't, it's like if you got 10 scholarships and I got 5, you're probably going to win most of the time. But I think it's like, hey, can I get the most out of this group? At the end of the year, I'm asking myself that, and were we better at the end than we were at the beginning? Those things are important. I want to go on the comparison thing right there too. Like, what would you say to that in general, and just keeping up with that standard? I mean, is it necessary to get caught up in what the best are doing, or would you prefer to stay focused and control the controllables, or control in general what you can control, while you're putting together a championship product?
I would say the more you can lean into what you can control, the better off you're going to be. And as we talk, like I said, you almost feel like you're going to like I'm talking to at a press conference, right? Like controllables and the coach buzzwords. But I do think it's so true. And whether it's in sport or in life, we as human beings tend to focus on all those things that we can't control, right? I think the pandemic was probably, it heightened everything, right? For people who struggled not being able to control things, they really lost it in that space, right? And this is no different in sports. I think programs who struggle tend to focus on all those things that are outside of their control. Now, we tend to lean into all those things, and you can make a laundry list of things that you can control in order to improve. I made it, and I hate using the word I, but I'll use I in this context. I made a commitment that we wouldn't complain about resources until we maximized everything we have, right? Until we controlled everything we could control. And I think now that we've gotten closer to that, I'm not saying we're there yet completely, but we've gotten closer to that. Now it's time for me as the head baseball coach, the head of the program, to start thinking about how we can get some better resources, right? And I'm not, and I sound like I'm crying here because we have great resources. It's not that, but to be in that top sliver, right?
Right. That makes sense.
Sits in the top 10, like that's a different animal. So now can we chip away at that? But I think it's in everyone's best interest, sports or otherwise, to lean into all those things that you can control and let other people make all the excuses on all those things that you have no control. Yeah. And so, like for me, Kevin, I don't listen to the news a whole lot. I don't watch the news a whole lot. I just feel like it's something, and sometimes that makes me maybe a less informed citizen, which I don't love, but I don't like wasting my time on things that I have zero control over. Yes. And so, when people bring these conversations to me about what's going on, sometimes I feel I'm not prepared to have the conversation just because I just don't tend to put my energy into those spaces.
Yeah, spot on. I couldn't agree more. I feel like I'm looking in the mirror when you say that. You just got a lot more hair. What would you? Let's go back to that. Just be you. I really like that. How do you create that environment? How do you create an environment that these players and coaches and everybody they want to be a part of? I mean, is that kind of the secret sauce? Is it I'm just allowing these people to be themselves and thrive in that?
Yeah, I think that's what we do. Like I know within our program, what we try to do is, there is a framework, there are guardrails, there is a structure, but within those guardrails and that framework, we want people to be their unique self, right? Like I really value diversity. I really do. Like diversity in thought, diversity, just across the board. And because I enjoy that eclectic nature, and so we want people to come to us and look. We all have a shared vision of trying to compete for a national championship. So that's a common bond that we all share, right? And then there's a style and a way that we like to play, and then but from there within that, go be you. Like I as a college athlete, I think sometimes people want to put labels on you. I know for myself, like people always ask me even now, like do the baseball players all hang out with baseball players? And I think families sometimes want to hear me say, oh yeah, it's like a family, like they're here and then they go eat together and then they go. I always say, I don't know. I hope not. We're at a university that has people from all over the world. Like I hope they're meeting other people. So I do want our kids to lean into being their unique self. And And yeah, they don't need to be like me or like anybody else. They just need to be the best version of them. And if we all do that, think about how powerful that is,
Yeah,
right? If we can all just be the best version of ourselves, I mean, think about how special that can be.
for sure. For sure. I'd be willing, if you don't mind, can you share, what's the most important thing you're looking for in a player in order to bring him, to your team? I know talent, but like, what is it, who is I would say who's a Mike Deegan guy? Like who fits man. Denison?
That's a great question. I mean, I would start with what you said there at the beginning, because I never, I never want to just go into a completely esoteric type space. Like there has to be a talent requirement, right? Like there has to be a certain level of a skill set that allows someone to play at a national caliber level. So you have to have that. But that's the more I do this, Kevin, you can probably relate with this from your days of coaching and just talking to coaches as well. It's amazing to me how many people have that talent base. Like they're all over the place. Like it's like there's a lot of really talented people out there. And I think being at a higher academic institution, being able to go to some of these events throughout the country, there's a lot of really good players. But from there, it becomes, are they a cultural fit? And so for us, I mean, I would say someone, I would just kind of lean into our value system a little bit, the idea of grit, and grit's become a bit of a buzzword, I know, but to me, we define as physical and mental toughness and the ability to persevere and overcome obstacles. So someone who has been hardened in some way, and they see all these challenges as opportunities, I think they're going to need that in order to thrive in our program. Gratitude is our second pillar, and I think, and we're looking for that. So what does that mean? To us, we say it's a readiness to show appreciation. So it's being ready to show appreciation. So you can see that in many different ways, the way kids interact with their parents on a visit, the way they interact with their teammates, the way they show up to a field. Does it look like they're in a dentist chair when they're playing baseball? Or they play with a big smile on their face? That's important to us, right? And then the last two of our values are the phrase Kaizen, which is continuous and never-ending improvement.
Love it.
And that's probably my life philosophy.
Yes.
So when we see a young man who you can tell they just have this obsession with improvement, they don't really care. They're probably the best player on their high school team or whatever, but it doesn't matter to them. They have the humility, right, from the gratitude piece. They have the humility, but they also know that they're just getting started. Like if someone, I always tell people in the recruiting visit, if you're a finished product now, if you don't like to be coached hard, this probably isn't going to work. And that can be a little bit hairy sometimes, Kevin, because that's also a flaw of mine. Like I still struggle. I still think I'm not any good at anything I do. It's my gift and my curse, but our players have to be okay with that, because, you could come watch us practice and go, man, coach, that was an awesome practice. And I'm going to focus on other things, which I don't say that's also really can be very damaging as well. So that's something I'm working on. And then the last piece is the phrase mudita, which is vicarious joy. Can I be happy for others' success as if it's my own? So when we're looking for players, can I see someone who just pours into their team? I think that's a lost art, right? Like just someone who's just a great, great teammate, and they lift people up around them and they celebrate other success. If you can find that type of unicorn, in some ways they're a unicorn, like someone who's really talented, uber competitive, but they love on other people. Gosh, like that would probably be, who we're looking for would be that quote unquote Mike Deegan guy.
Yeah, that's great. I was telling you about the IMG coach Dave. He had a great story about Kaizen. I love Kaizen. I'm glad that you talked about that. But I do think, and this, man, I look back at this and, I think, the players that we brought in, were they Kevin Bille guy? And sometimes, it wasn't the kid's fault. I know that it was me, but I do know that, it's tough. If you're out there right now listening as a leader, especially a coach, I think you got to have a great deal of conviction with this, Mike, because I'll just tell you a quick example. I want to say it was our 7th or 8th year when we transitioned from NAI to D2 and needed to get better players. And I had just bumped my GA up and he was pushing me. There's kids still left in July, talented. Mm-hmm. Came up and I'm like, this isn't going to work. He's not a Kevin Bille guy. And then, end of July, early August, he's still available. And we took a chance. And I was miserable that year. I mean, that kid was a great player, you know, and I think he might even been freshman of the year, to be honest with you. At the end of the year, I just had to say, hey man, this isn't going to work. It's not you, it's me. You know, our trains are going different ways, but it also, you know, it was one of those where it was definitely addition by subtraction, because the kids could feel it in there every day and it wasn't a fit to our culture. And so I think that's just so important for people that are listening, you know, to stay convicted with that.
I say, though, I think the same holds true in the business sector as well. You know, I don't know if you heard the Bo Schembechler story. Have you ever heard that story?
I don't know which one. So yeah, enlighten me, please.
I should probably give a little context. But he used to say, when you lose a recruit, he could beat you once a year. But if you get the wrong recruit, he's going to beat you every day.
That's right.
And I think that's what happened to you. You got beat every day. And I think when you have those people on your roster, regardless of how talented they are, or in your company or in your organization, what I've said, I don't have the language behind this, but I hope this makes some sense. It changes you as a coach sometimes. Like, you show up 100%. Differently, you know, like, and I don't, like I said, I don't have quite the language. We all have that person when we see them walk through the door, like, we change a little bit, and we can't, you can't coach them hard. You can't, or whatever it may be, but your personality gets changed, and that happens every day. And think about how impactful that is. So you're right. So that's why, you know, our recruiting philosophy, I say I'm the worst. We just tell our story, and we're okay losing some guys with that.
That's right.
Like, you're okay. Cause it's just like, you know what, if they wanted a guarantee, if they wanted this or that, it's probably not going to be a good fit over here for 4 years, you know? So, I think if I were to give recommendation to coaches or organizations, you have to be really clear on your values and just lean into them, and be okay when you lose that talented person, going, okay, our culture is going to trump their culture in the long run, and we'll win out over time. Yeah,
that's good. That's good. I agree. And I think, to your point, like, as a coach, then it's like you're almost catering, or you're making exceptions, and you're not being you, right? You're not coaching them, and people can see right through that, the authenticity and all of that. I would be anxious to know, you know, what are some ways that you're feeding your culture every day? And don't take this the wrong way. I've said it on here before. I don't need to know how to be successful. I think all of us, but the key to me is, how are you feeding this culture every day so it sustains?
I think one thing is, you know, it's living and breathing. Culture is living and breathing. And I think people get really turned off by that word because it's become a bit of a buzzword. So people just throw it out there, right? They got a bad culture, good culture. So what I've learned is, this is now just where I am today in this journey, that I really don't care what you say. I don't care. Like, I like to come watch, right? And so I try to remove myself sometimes as the head coach, and just go, okay, if Kevin came and watched us practice today, what would he see? Because that's your culture, right? Like, and so if you came to our practice and you came as a visitor and no one said hi to you today, no one introduced themselves to you, if you saw bad attitudes and guys not going hard, if you saw very selfish play, then that's our culture. That's who we are. We're unwelcoming, entitled, and let's just say the word soft, like a soft play. You didn't compete today. That's who we are. So what I will try to do, I'm hoping I'm answering your question. I will try to remove myself sometimes and go, okay, here's what I saw today. Like that. I love going and observing. You know, when Ohio State men's basketball practice here a few years ago, and it was great just to watch and observe and just get your notebook out and go, my goodness, this is what I'm seeing today, right? I could hopefully talk to their coach and say, this is your culture, and it would have been nothing but praise, by the way. So, anyways, I try to like almost remove myself from the situation and go, okay, are we really tough? Are we really being gritty? Are we playing with joy? Did our guys go over and welcome those guests that came into our program today? And that's how I try to evaluate and check. It is a constant fight. If you think your culture is complete, I think that's the moment you're going to lose it. So I stay up and obsess about the direction of our program. So call it culture, call it whatever you want, environment. I obsess about the direction we're going, and are we being authentic to those core values, or are we not?
Yeah, that's good. And that's a good foundation that you guys have to go back to. I'd be anxious here as we're talking. You know, I mean, we're looking for this elite, and I know that you just we'll get to the website later, but your newsletter, what makes elite? Touch on that a little bit and some of those things that you found, because I thought that was a great article.
Yeah, thank you. I think one, I have a great thinking partner that sometimes we'll chop things up on Tuesday mornings, and sometimes we'll just float a question. So another little nugget, if you will, is, if you can find people like that in your life, just to chop up these ideas, I think is really powerful. So to me, I'll go back to what I mentioned about a recruit. I think a lot of times when you see the elite, the best of the best, there's something genetically gifted, right? Like they if it's an athlete, they look the part, right? But also, I think the one that the side part of that is environmentally gifted. And so for me, like I always say, I grew up in a diverse area where I could be playing basketball and be the only only white person in the area in the afternoon, and then at night I had a friend whose dad was a CEO, and I could be in a corporate box at a Pirate game. So I could go from like those two ways. So I think what I've learned, so like this is, and I'm not saying I'm elite at this, but I have a chance to be elite at connecting with people because I know what it's like to connect on many different levels. And I've also learned not to be overwhelmed by either one of those situations. So anyways, so that's an example of how an environment can shape somebody. From there, I think I've noticed that they're obsessed with improvement. They're obsessed with getting better. They just love it. They love it so much. And then from there, because of that obsession, I think they're able to see future trends. They can kind of see where it's going. So if you think about an athlete, so you can go, I don't know, maybe you're making this too much. But I think about like a LeBron James. So LeBron, obviously genetically gifted, obviously was obsessed with being one of the best in the world. But then what's he able to see? He's able to see about taking care of your body and nutrition and health. And he invests, I don't know, $1 million a year, people say, in his body. Like that's being visionary. Like that's not, he could have peaked at, or it could have been finished at 28, 30, like most NBA players, but his longevity. And then from there, my last piece of that article was moving forward, then your ability to communicate that, you're able to bring unbelievable support systems into your world. So when you speak it into existence, you're able to attract other people. So once again, to use LeBron, he has the best trainers, the best business people all around him that can support his endeavors. So my mind tends to go to sports, but I think you can use that framework and agree or disagree. It's a working framework on just some of the better organizations. I think there's some kind of structure to that that's similar to what I laid out.
It's good. It's good. What about, you talk about grit. I mean, I'm all about resiliency. It's as a father, I'm probably preaching every day, as I've probably said on here every other episode, but I could argue that baseball players exhibit it the most. I mean, and if not this, then it's a quick memory because there are so many games in general, but so many at bats and 30% of the time you get a hit. You're unless you're a 12U coach like me and our kids are hitting 600. But
that's right.
How are they able to do this? Like, how are the best ones, especially the best ones, I guess? And is that a separator, or do you see that as a separator from good to great in your game?
I would say grit for sure. I think the other piece that I don't know, maybe you're alluding to a touch there is consistency. Mm-hmm. To me, that's the mark of a great baseball player. And now I relate everything to sports, but even just, I think any business, any person, it's the ability to show up every day. It's, me on this podcast is one thing, but for you to see me do it every single day, I think that's when you go, oh, this person's pretty special. We look at the difference between the talent between a big league baseball player and a double A baseball player. It's not all that much different. They throw about the same velocity. They can hit the ball about as far as hard. But it's the ability to show up and put all those distractions away in baseball, 162 nights of that, right? You're fighting with your wife, your spouse, your kids have issues at home. You can go through it, but they can shut all that down and be present in that moment, day after day after day after day. So that's grit, perseverance in some regard, but also that word consistency is what I think makes that sport. You have to, once again, you have to have the barrier to entry. You have to have a certain talent level, but then who can every pitch. One of my favorite things to do is go to a game and sit up really high. And if you watch, like a pitch is thrown, and then guys go and they go space out for the next 15 to 18 seconds. They're doing whatever. And then you'll see there's like a heartbeat to it. Right when the pitch is delivered, you'll see the infielders jump and get ready to get into a ready position. Every single pitch, every night for 162 of them, you're feeling that heart and that rhythm of the game. And you know how easy it is to just take that pitch off? But the greats don't, right? The greats show up and they do it every single night. So yeah, call it grit, call it perseverance, call it resiliency, call it consistency. I think that's a special part of our game.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Let's just focus on you here a little bit. What are some ways, just for some leaders maybe to hear some things? I think these are interesting. What are some ways that you slow it down or even shut it off, as I like to call it?
I used to struggle with that. I think one of the things about having an obsession is that it's really hard to stop. It's really hard. It's really hard to turn that off switch. And for me, a lot, it's in my mind. I'm constantly looking for, like, I love this idea of leadership, coaching, creating learning environments. So my lens, almost, I could be watching a commercial and I'll see something that makes me think of that obsession. So where I have to filter myself is that sometimes my neighbor across the street isn't going to want to hear about it in that context. So you get, it's your social cues, right? You have to understand what environment you're in. So I really struggle with it. The pandemic helped me a ton. And I think people that have listened or followed me over the years are going to be disappointed in this, but over that time, we got into Netflix. My wife and I started watching some shows. I probably watched more shows, TV, in the last year than I did in the last probably 15 prior to that.
Mm-hmm.
And at first I wasn't okay with it because I've always been, hey, you should be reading, you should be doing whatever. But I have found that my wife really enjoys that time. It's given me something to look forward to. Mm-hmm. And while it may not be helping in my growth in some ways, it's helping in my relationships. And I've learned to be okay with that. So to answer your question, I would say, yeah, a little bit of Netflix, but I'll answer it with this though, Kevin. I don't always like to shut off. I don't feel overwhelmed very often. Like when I go on vacation, I love to go on a long walk or run, throw a headset in and listen to a podcast. Like I enjoy that. That's energizing for me. I get rejuvenated. So when I vacation or take time, I take time to learn and read and study, and some people will say, oh, you're not getting away, but no, I actually enjoy it. So I've also had to balance what society sees as yes. shutting down with what I see as shutting down. So,
man, it is so spot on. Like I'm the same exact way. I mean, it is hard to shut it off. And when the others can't relate to that, I don't know who's right or wrong there. Right. And it's just different for everybody. And don't get me wrong. Like I have to battle that same thing. It's like on Saturday, I'll sit down with the boys and we watch a whole Notre Dame game. And I know maybe I'm not growing, but then I also think to myself, like, that's healthy for my soul. That's healthy for them to spend time with dad. Or to your point, when my wife and I watch Ted Lasso and all that. Right. And it's crazy because I'm watching Ted Lasso and I'm trying not to think of things, but I'm like, oh, how can I, but it can be good for both ways. And I think it's how you're wired too.
It's how you're wired. And like I said, it's all okay. Like, I think I know myself now. I'm different than a lot of people, and I don't, and for the good and the bad, but I'm someone who I need my family structure to be sound. Like I need that. Like I can't function without that. Mm-hmm. But here's a big but. I'm different in the regard that I don't need to be at all my kids' events. I don't need to be around all the time. Like I don't need that. But I need that family unit to feel, I need that's settled. So yeah, so watching the Notre Dame game with your son, like that to me that's doing a lot for you personally as well, right? So like I said, I'm not describing that well, but if the home team's not taken care of, then I'm out of whack. Then I can't do my job as good as I can. But I'm also not, I miss the majority of my son's baseball games because our scheduling conflict. And that's cool with me too, because I go home and say, how'd you do today, bud? And we can talk about it. Like I guess we don't fall into some of the norms of society right now.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously you've got this growth mindset. You mentioned it, podcast. We talk books on here. I love listening to people tell me about some books maybe I've read or haven't read. Yeah. Just what are some of those ways that you do continually grow? We talked beforehand, like, taking a trip down to Georgia like you did and being around those people, the Florida one for me. What are those for you? And once again, any book plugs, please.
So for me, it started with reading. I heard a long time ago, a guy said, if you read one book a week for 5 years, you can become an expert in that field. So I became obsessed with reading. I was consuming on road trips when people were watching the Happy Gilmore for the 25th time on the bus, I would be reading. That was kind of my thing. Now, as my time has become tougher, we have 4 kids. I'm doing a lot of things. It's tough for me to consume books like that as much as I used to. So now it's kind of the traditional things, podcasts, articles. But where I really find my biggest growth is in having conversations like this. So
yes,
that's now the space that I'm in is, I need to be read enough to be able to have those deep conversations. But, taking a concept that may seem very simple to others and trying to flush it out. And then it becomes that simple concept becomes really complex. But by that time you get done with it, it goes back to really simple again. But now you have a better understanding of it. I think that's probably where I'm best now. As far as books go, I'll just throw a few out. What I'm reading now is a book called Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters. I have 3 daughters and 1 son. And Alabama's coach, Pat Murphy, is a great friend and mentor of mine, recommended it to me. He works with young women all the time. And he said, hey, I think it's a good book for you to have as a dad. A book that's very impactful that I just finished was a book called The Tough Stuff by Cody Royal. And any head coach or any leader who's listening, I really recommend it. And I think sometimes books find you in a space where you need to be. And for right now, for me, I'm obsessed with coach support and coach development. I'm really worried for my children that many great coaches are going to get out of this business because the weight of carrying, as Cody describes it, the weight of carrying is so much and so heavy that people are getting out. Parent involvement, all that stuff. Great leaders aren't going to be coaching very much longer if we don't get that together. We don't get them some support. A fun read that I have, I'll give you 2 more recommendations. Fun read is The Shoe Dog by Phil Knight. It was a complete page turner. And my all-time favorite is a book called The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. There's a phrase in there that if you're doing what you love, the whole universe conspires in your favor. And I found that to be very true, that when you can find something that you love and you're passionate about and you pour yourself into it, it's amazing where life will take you and how the universe will work in your favor.
That's great. I'm actually finishing up The Alchemist right now via Clint Hurdle. That we just talked about. Mm-hmm. And I'll have you know, too, this episode, the previous episode is Cody Royal, The Tough Stuff.
There's a plug for Cody. And I've never met Cody. I've had a few exchanges with him, but that's pretty cool. I'm glad he's doing some very, very important work, in my opinion, right now. Yeah, so important. So important. All right, hey, we're going to jump into 3-pointers here, Coach, but I have a warm-up question. I started it with Cody, actually. I'm going to see if this one can fit in now. I want to know, if you had 1 extra day each week, how would you spend it? Oh, okay. So if I had 1 extra day each week, I would it would start with a great workout, like an unbelievable workout. Some time to read, write, and reflect. Some time to connect spend good quality time with my wife and my kids. And I think honestly those 3 things, if I could do that, like those are things where I go, man, I won the day. And I could do that on any day of the week. Right. But if I could really just isolate that and not worry about anything else besides those 3 things. And actually, I'll throw one more thing, because I love what I do. If I got a chance to coach our team up, go out there and coach. Like I wouldn't. So I guess, Kevin, my life wouldn't change a whole lot, right? If I can get a good workout in, eat some good food, spend some great time with people I love, write, read, reflect, and then coach up some great guys, I'm living pretty good.
Good. All right, we'll get in 3-pointers now. I like that question. I heard about it a couple of weeks ago, and I'm like, hey, I'm going to start asking people.
It's good.
So number 1 here, it's rapid fire, but by all means, take your time if you need to. Number 1, if people could learn one thing from this talk, what would you want them to learn, Mike, and just kind of hold on to?
From this talk, I would say, just me as a small school coach, right? That I would recommend for anyone to start producing more than they're consuming. So by producing, I mean, write and put it out there. Try to publish an article. Start a podcast like you're doing. Just by putting yourself out there, I've been amazed at what it's done for me and how my world has opened up. And yes, you expose yourself to more critics. You People can say, hey, you should spend more time coaching your team than writing or whatever. But the people that I've been able to attract into my world by producing and not just reading, or studying, but by actually doing, by being a practitioner and sharing those stories, it's really changed my life. And I don't like to use that phrase. I don't use that phrase lightly, but it's changed my life.
Yeah, that's powerful. I second that. Very powerful. Number two, if Coach Deegan could have came over here today and been behind the mic and asked him a question, what question would have you asked him that I did not ask today?
Well, I'm glad you didn't ask this question because I don't have an answer for it. But you get it a decent amount. Like, where do you see yourself in 5 or 10 years? Something like that. And I wouldn't have had a great answer for that. So I can't sit here and say it. So I'm thankful you didn't ask it. But I think those are I'm always interested on where people see themselves heading. And that's a question that fascinates me a lot of times. For me, I can't give you a pinpoint right now, but I'd like to know from myself where this is going to be in 5 or 10 years.
Yeah. Well, I probably wouldn't ask because I didn't like when parents asked me that when I was a coach all the time, right? Finally, good stuff's the name of this. Give us some good stuff in closing here. Anything that you feel is appropriate.
Well, I think leaning into your authentic self, right? Trying to figure out, spending that deep work to get an understanding of what you value, and then from that moment forward, just trying to surround yourself with people from all different walks of life who are on that same journey with you. I think when you can do that, I think you can start living the best version of your life. So take that time, reflect, even though we're in such a busy world right now where busy is popular, to say, hey, I don't have enough time. And even to answer your question about what to do on the extra day, what you're supposed to say is, oh man, I wish I had more time. But really to create that time, learn about yourself, and then surround yourself with people who are on a similar mission. And I say similar, not the same, but on a similar mission. I think that really opens things up and allows you to just become a special version of yourself.
All right. I like it. 3 for 3 there. Hey, let's just, 2 things. First thing, where can our listeners connect with you just social media wise?
So you can find me on Twitter. That's where I'm most active, is on Twitter. I have Instagram, all that, but Twitter is where I'm active in like the banter. So that's my social media platform preference. And
then second thing, just the website, just talk to us about that a little bit. Of course, we've talked a lot of baseball and some leadership in general, and just some of those other things that you're doing, please, Mike.
Yeah. So I write a weekly newsletter that you can find and sign up for on my website, which is coachmikedeegan.com. So the newsletter is free. I always feel like you have like different levels of things now. So I have a newsletter that's free. I have a book called Let It Rip, that you can find on my website as well. You can buy it through Amazon. I have some online courses on clearlearn.com, and I'm in the works of starting a podcast right now as well. So, but if you find me on Twitter, you can get pretty good access to all of that. A lot of free content, majority free. And then I also have the speaking engagements as well, where I speak to businesses and coaches as well. Great. And you got a World Series winner for us or not? I'm pulling for the Giants once again for people, right? I've become good friends, and I shouldn't say good friends, but a friend of mine is Kai Correa, their bench coach, a great, humble person, small school guy, and they've done well. So I don't know if it's a prediction or not. I just tell you who I'm pulling for at this time. There you go. Well, hey, Mike, I appreciate this, man. Thanks so much for coming on. Congrats on everything up to this point you've done, and I'm sure we'll keep doing here in 5 to 10 years, wherever that might be. I'm really impressed. I can definitely tell how sharp you are as a leader, and we just need more people, like you in terms of coaching these young athletes. So, stay healthy this year and just win some games. I appreciate it, Kevin. Thank you so much. Yeah, and I'll make sure I tell my wife's a Worcester grad, so I'll tell her I'm not rooting for Denison when they play them. But good luck with all that. Well, hey, everybody, thanks again for listening. We appreciate you tuning in. As always, as you know, you can reach out to me at goodstuffkevin@gmail.com. I'm anxious to hear what you got out of today's episode. Till next time, good stuff.